And here's the final install, just as I envisioned it. What is going on, guys? It's No Nonsense Know-How again, and in this video I want to talk about heating oil storage. I'll show you my current setup, which is a little scattered and crazy right now, and then we'll fast forward and I'll show you the ultimate setup that I'm going to hopefully end up with. Most people have just one heating oil tank in their house and then they get deliveries. But since I'm some kind of a prepper, I would like to have 3 tanks. Now, true story. When I first moved into my house 10 years ago, that is the only time I ever purchased heating oil. I think I bought like a half tank to top off the tank. And since then, I've gotten all my heating oil for free or have gotten paid to do it because I go out and do pump outs, and that's a whole nother video in itself. But as I do that, I end up getting a bunch of free tanks too, so I'll sell those tanks. But I've kind of been holding on to the last few Roth tanks I get because I like these and I want to basically line up 3 of them on the wall here. There's really no need for 3 tanks since I only had this little Beckett burner set up, and I do have a wood stove in case that was to ever fail. But as I go get this free heating oil all the time and I do these pump outs, I don't want to sell the stuff, so I'd rather be able to just hold on to it and use it as I need it. And if not, I could always run it in my MEP 803A military generator. And also in an apocalyptic situation, I could run this stuff in my Dodge Ram 12-valve Cummins. So anyway, hopefully that gives you some kind of an idea where I'm coming from. Let's talk about the plan now. I'm going to pump out this 14 gauge today and probably put it on Facebook Marketplace. I'll let you know what I end up getting for it. But I just want to have all the Roth tanks because I trust them. Yeah, this. By the way, in case you're not familiar with these, probably should have mentioned these have a plastic liner tank inside, and then if that tank is to ever leak, it has this little pop-up right here, and the flag will float and let you know that the oil has leaked into the outer encasement shell, and then that will be contained. You'll see that flag, and you can pull this out and pump the tank out and replace it as need be. If this baby leaks, or one of these legs break, which I've heard stories of these legs that are very kind of skimpily welded on there. If these rust and break and this thing falls over in your basement, well, that's going to be an absolute nightmare. But everybody's switching over to natural gas. I say, no way. Keep your heating oil because you have control over how much heat you have on stockpile. You don't rely on some kind of natural gas pipeline that may or may not explode or be involved in any kind of terroristic event or something. I mean, you got heating oil. Of course, if you store this much in your basement and then somebody burns your house down, that might be a bad story, but, you know, here we go. There you go. I'll very briefly show you some of the gear that I use for pumping heating oil, but that's going to be a whole separate video if you want to see everything that I have. So we'll start with, you always need a long stick for being able to hold your hose straight in the tank. And then I use a short one like this with the hose zip tied to it, so you can drop this to the bottom, cap the top, pull it out like a straw, and then see what the bottom of the tank looks like. So if you have water or not, using that water finding paste they sell is great too. It's like a paste you rub onto the stick and then it will turn pink if there's water, or you know, they have different colors for it. Fill right 3/4 inch transfer hose. I have, I believe, about 80 feet of hose here. Now I always used 3/4, and I've since upgraded to 1 inch, which I'll show you. But before we open that up, just a few other odds and ends. Pressure gauges and filters. I got my Nova Flex aircraft 1.5 inch hose that I use for bulk transfers. People have all sorts of different setups for this stuff. Now, I do keep the majority of my components in this case because honestly, the stuff stinks if you just store it outside. The smell never goes away. So, extension cord. Here's my Fill-Rite 1 inch transfer hose. Now, this stuff's great, but if you're pumping a long distance, it does tend to want to suck in on itself if you get restrictions in the tank. So getting like a poly hose, 1 inch poly feel hose, can be better for that. But once I get all this pump out, I'll show you everything. I got tons of hydraulic connectors. Well, they're actually, what are they called? Cam buckle connectors. And yeah, let me get set up here. When I first got into this hobby, I used to use primarily 55-gallon steel barrels and sometimes the poly barrels too. What's really great about those is you can actually load one in the truck yourself or with a friend if you use ramps, or my Kubota can actually lift 2 of those as well. But then I got into using a bulk steel tank like this. I did a bunch of modifications on this. It's got a vented cap. I welded old leaf springs on here with D-ring so you can lift it when it's full, and D-ring in the center for lifting when it's empty. I welded a 4-inch clean out on the top, 2-inch high flow valve. It's got 1-inch and 3/4 drains on the bottom, and valves on this side too. Problem with this tank is I can't lift this in my truck myself without the tractor, and my current tractor I have now can't lift this when it's full, so this is kind of obsolete. So I've now been using these 275 plastic totes, and some guys might frown on this because it's not as sturdy as steel, but after doing a ton of research, I mean, these are plenty rated for fuel. They work great. God forbid one ruptures though, you better make sure you use fresh ones. Don't use an old one that's been sitting out in the sun and dry rotted and brittle, because if one fracture going down the road, I mean, everything I did read says that if you're not doing it for commercial use and you're doing it personal use, you can legally transfer fuel. Depends on what state you're in though, and if you have a spill, well, you're probably gonna regret trying to save a few bucks doing this. Do bear in mind that when I originally got into this hobby, fuel was upwards of $4 a gallon. It's now down at like $1.48. So I actually charge people if I go and do pump outs because it's not even worth it. But it's still nice having the gear, and I've saved many, many thousands of dollars over the years. I have an Apache automatic shut-off 1-inch diesel nozzle, 1-inch swivel, going to 1-inch hose. Yep. Okay. Over to this pump. I'll try to plug links to all this stuff down below. Most of it I got on Amazon, but this is just a generic 115 volt pump. And then I have a 12 volt one that hooks up to your battery. Use some old jumper cables to extend the leads, run that to your battery. And this you can get at Harbor Freight, or you can get these on Amazon too. Everything I'm using is these cam locks, so always have something underneath, because you see how we always get a trickle. It's actually good to have a pan or something else in case you have a major leak. But an even safer option than these is these ISOB self-sealing couplers. Now they're so big and bulky and they kind of restrict flow, but you'll never have a spill with these because they automatically seal when you release. These are actually for like hydraulic lines. It's a big piece for only a 3/4, and that's why I switched over. You just get much higher flow with these. I've also got this oil filter with a stainless steel strainer in there. You definitely want to strain this stuff. I mean, because it can honestly destroy your pump. Well, you know what it'll do? It'll clog the screen up inside of here super quick. So you kind of need one of these. And you're able to see what kind of oil you got coming out too. And then just a bunch more cam lock adapters and lots of that stuff. Extension cord. There's that water finding paste in case you want to get some of that stuff. Gasola makes it. Of course, you need some monkey wrenches, yada, yada, yada. I think I showed you enough of what you need to know. I'm going to pump my tank out now into this. Always, always, always zip tie or secure down your nozzle so it does not pop out. And it's something you want to make sure you don't overfill your tank as well, because that's another nice thing about these totes is you can see your level. With a black steel tank, you ain't going to see it. And these automatic shutoffs do work, but God forbid the thing doesn't work. Not good. Don't ever go removing your plug or cap rapidly because if it's laying on the ground like that, you probably have some kind of heating oil in there. So bring it up and then slowly release it. If there's anything in there, then you better go get a bucket. Let's see. This one, I bet you it'll have something in there, and that's kind of the downside of these over, like I said, the ISOBs, but you go very slowly. Okay, that baby's dry. That's great. And you can also put the cotter pin through these holes to reduce the chance of the cam unbuckling during operation. One of these stiff sticks zip tied to your line is really going to help out a lot, and leave your pickup at least an inch or so off the bottom of the tank, even if you know it's a clean tank. Like I know this one doesn't have any water in it, but you don't want to be sucking all that sludge up or getting this stuck up against the bottom of the tank. I used to actually use a pickup screen too, but the problem with that was it would get clogged up so quick since you can't fit that much surface area of a screen through the hole. So now I use the external one. We're live and ready to go. I've checked all my connections. Everything's good. This is self-priming, so let's see how long it takes to prime. The closer you get this pump to the tank, always the better, by the way. Here we go. Be ready to kick that off if you have to. And here it comes. Oh, there you go. Some dark oil on the bottom. Okay. Oops, I actually didn't have the valve open up here, so that's why it took a little bit longer to establish prime, but that goes to show you all the connections are tight on this and good. Of course, that thing doesn't really build up very much pressure. It has a very low blow-off pressure, but you can see that's our flow, and I'm actually going to time this too. Very good flow with the 1-inch hose. I'll time this and let you know how long it takes to transfer 275 gallons because that tank is basically full to the top right now. Flowing real nice here, and this sludge was already on here before, so we can keep an eye on this and see if we pick up any nasty stuff at all. I rarely ever use those little cotter pins in here, but I'm going to change that today. I'm going to start using copper wire like this because this is a lot quicker to get on and off and effectively does the same thing, because especially at this motor, you have a lot of vibration here, and I guess I could see one of these rattling loose, and I mean, Jesus, that would just be horrific. Heating oil weighs 8.2 pounds per gallon, so at 275 gallons, you're about 2,255 pounds. That being said, make sure you set the tote where its exact location is supposed to be, because you pretty much ain't shimmy-shammying that once it's done. And that's just about a wrap. You can see it's starting to suck up that dark oil on the bottom of the tank. That's okay though, because I'm gonna deal with that later. Up, you see a little bit of water in there too. You see that? So boom, that took just over 15 minutes. Not too bad. Now, that actually brings you to another point. The one thing I don't like about these Roth tanks is that they don't have a drain on the bottom, on the direct way bottom. However, this tank never had one either. So, you know, you can always drop a rod down there and pump off the bottom every few years or something like that if you think you got water intrusion. But I can definitely see that there was a little bit of water in there. And now I'm ready to chisel some of this concrete that's in the way, clean this all up, and get the Roth over here. An interesting thing about this old tank is I believe it's actually a double bottom, because you see it has a welded seam up on the top, but then come down below it's got, originally I thought it just had multiple seams, but it has a seam right here and then another seam back right here running along this side. So I think if you look at it, the metal's actually thicker on the bottom too. I think this is a double bottom tank, and that would explain why it's lasted so long. But definitely, a substantial rust on it, and I'm glad to be replacing it and getting something that's a little bit more modern. Taking a look at that. Oh yeah. So I mean, it's nothing. It's not rotted through or anything like that. But and of course, when these start leaking, they will start just getting wet on the bottom. It's not like they just blow out all of a sudden. However, these legs, again, as these get rusted, I have heard stories of, it's pretty rare, but I've heard stories of these falling off and then the whole tank falling over. And of course, the reason they do these double bottom tanks is because that's the most common place for them to rot out. The water will sit. There's always going to be getting water in your diesel fuel or heating oil, and that will sit on the bottom and then cause them to rust out from the inside usually. So. And here's the final install, just as I envisioned it. Went with a 2-inch black pipe on the fill end vent. This is an elbow with the side outlet, and then you see the piping for the vent going out. Each one has its own whistler. Each one has its own ball valve. So if, say, you wanted to fill the end tank, you would just leave these two shut and just open the end tank up. All the coppers flared out. Each one has its own fire valve. And then it goes up in here. The system primed great because I got a tiger loop over there, so no problem with the air pockets causing issues or anything. And I did end up using level quick on the floor and recoating this too, just because it was kind of cattywampus. I got some PVC trim pieces under here to keep the steel off the concrete, keep that from rusting out. And yes, I am stoked to have all the heating oil. Each one, those two are full, and this one's almost full. So yeah, good to go with the end of the world supply. And it was many runs to Home Depot to get them to cut these pipes, because I'm not a plumber, so I wasn't exactly sure on the lengths. I think I did like 2 or 3 runs between the fills and vents to get that all right. I even coated them with Rust-Oleum. Not that I needed to do that, but looks good, won't rust. So yeah, if you liked the video or gave you ideas, drop it a thumbs up. And otherwise, this has just been a documentation of my triple Roth heating oil storage setup that I'm sure people are going to be like, why the heck do you got that in a 700 square foot house? Alrighty, hopefully see you in another one, guys.